And how quickly you forget that.
So all of a sudden you're like, I can
Yeah, I forgot how good I can feel. All right, I do believe there's coffee for those who wish. Is that correct, Donna? Oh, decaf coffee? Okay.
You're on this.
Oh, high coffee.
There's a McCain's cake in the freezer.
And I didn't know. Well, okay. Well, we're good. All right. Good evening, everyone. Everyone. Man, I am having problems lately. Yeah, everyone, everybody. There was an English preacher called Jacob or Joseph. I can't remember if his name, but his last name was Spooner. And Spooner had the habit of mixing the letters up. He put the letter from one word on the back of the other word. So, like one time he said, it's customary to cuss the bride because he would get the letters mixed up. So I do have a tendency to Spoonerism where I'll put the letter and get them sideways and backwards. So. What's that?
Brain's going to.
I think that's the problem, and the medication hasn't kicked in yet to slow it down. But does he do spoonerisms? So I'm developing like a 7-year-old. It's a circle, yes. I did find a motorcycle patch that said, "Don't blame me, I'm still 9 years old." So I kind of thought that was a nice vibe. Before we start our study, one of the fundamental ways I understand kind of how Jesus worked is he takes the cultural norm and he turns it upside down. And we've seen this, we call this the upside down kingdom. You know, you've heard it said, therefore I say. So one of the things I like to do is look at the culture around us, how people speak, how they live their lives, their values, and to say, okay, what would happen if we flipped it on its head and did the opposite? You know, it seems to be a normative pattern of how Jesus instructed his followers to behave. So here's my latest one, and I'm going to pull the electorate and see what you think. It kind of bothers me that when people address a group of mixed individuals, let's say guys. So guys, and actually I was corrected quite when I was speaking one time at Miller of all places. One of the staff members took me aside and said, "Please don't call them guys. You know, ladies and gentlemen, students, but don't call them guys." Okay, so that was many years ago, and so I really resisted doing that. So I thought, okay, how can I flip this over now? So I'm thinking of calling people girls now. So it's like, hey, girls, be quiet. Or what do you think, Dylan?
Are we a sports team?
I know. I was like, yeah, I'm thinking,
Right, lady.
all right, lady. I know. I was thinking of flip it around. It does. Can I so I can do that?
It's a lot.
I don't go to locker rooms. So girls tonight. See, I don't know if that works or not. So I like folks, yeah, or brethren and sister. Well, see, it's insulting to you as well. So now that does not work. So what's the you plural that works? People. Oh,
Buddy.
yeah, your husband's not here to correct that. But I like beloved. Yeah, beloved's the one that works best for me. Beloved, folks. So beloved. Yeah, I think I'll stick with beloved. All right. All that aside, it's just a little twist of my thinking this morning. So we are at.
Just now.
Yes, because I was thinking about this morning. It was only a twist this morning as I was thinking this morning, and it's been trickling through my day, and now it's coming out.
I'm track exam.
Thank you, Dylan. So few can. Dylan, I also have a theory that in 1 Corinthians, when Paul says it is a shame for men to have long hair, he's talking about beards.
I'm 30.
Yeah.
The same trim here.
But that's in the Old Testament, though. And then,
But we wouldn't contradict that and say that.
But by the time he gets to the New Testament, he says it is a shame for men to have long hair. So Doug, Tashinga, and I are godly men, and you are barbarians. Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding.
I'm with Spurgeon. He's a good godly man who loves a beard.
Yeah.
We like Spurgeon.
Well, actually, if you read the passage, it says that it's a shame for women to have short hair. So it's talking about head hair. I can't make that exegesis. I will not die on the hill of men shouldn't have beards, but my wife might. Sorry, let me just tell you. I grew a beard one time, and I was in co-op, and this little child came up to me and said, "Why is Santa so angry?" So since that day, I have not wanted to look like an angry Santa. All right, we come to the end of Colossians. We have a bit of territory to cover, but at the same time, this is an occasion when the territory is clear. Now, often, as we struggle with the theology and the language, especially Paul's language, sometimes the words are difficult to translate, or the concepts are foreign to us. We have to place them into modern context, taking ideas from the first century Greco-Roman world and trying to navigate them into the 21st century Western ideology. At this point, though, we are at the clearer part. We're at what Scripture and others time and again is called the therefore section. What does therefore mean?
In light of.
In light of, as a consequence to, right? Can you think of a good example of a very powerful or impactful therefore? If you, then what happens?
Oh, it's real world application.
Real world. Give me an illustration. No, we're just a real world application. Yeah, just a real world application. Sure, it's cause and effect, right? Yes, that's right. Saskatoon, the fire department in April had, was it 360 calls for overdoses? It was a staggering number. And so, great. Well, we understand the world of cause. What are the benefits of cause and effect? What would life be like without it?
Working.
Yeah, you couldn't learn. Yeah. And all our science depends on it, right? If this happens, therefore this happens, this cause and effect world. We as Westers want to understand the cause, therefore we can control the effect, right? What happens if you don't understand the cause and all you experience is the effect? You don't know how to stop it. You can't. Disease, right? You think of disease in the Middle Ages, they thought all kinds of things, bad humors. George Washington died of being bled to death because he had bad humors, not humor like haha. So they were trying to get rid of the bad blood. So they didn't understand cause and effect. Some would argue that the greatest scientific invention of all time is microbiology because of the billions of lives it's saved, right? So Paul comes to this therefore section. There's one cultural note I think we need to understand, especially in regard to the relationship of Paul's radical nature about women in this section. And I'm not treading on delicate ground here. This is an interesting point. Well, I hope it is. There was a Greek philosopher called Socrates, and Socrates laid the foundation of how people thought about life. Remember, we said that the Romans built the road, the Jews built the temple, and the Greeks built the thought process. So the Romans and the Jews of the time were called Hellenistic. They thought like Greeks. So Aristotle and later on Plato's thoughts processes entered into the culture, and they said that's how the world works. So what Aristotle taught was that everybody has a soul, but the soul made progress. And that an enlightened man, an elevated philosopher, noble king, had an elevated soul, but he had inherited that soul from another man who was a little less enlightened. So when you died, based on the nature of your soul, whether it was degrading or elevating, it would enter into another body. So I want you to imagine that your soul degrades and it finds itself in the worst possible man you can think of. Just a horrible, abusive, violent criminal of all, and every moral reprehensible you can think of is this soul. Okay, when he dies, where does his soul go? He's now at the bottom of the ring of souls, and he's a man.
And
What's that?
in the hand.
No, women. Women were the repository of the degraded souls of men.
In which culture?
A Greek.
Oh, Greek.
Yeah. Remember Greek culture?
This.
Yeah, it does. But the Greeks believed in the transmission of the soul. So I want you to think, ladies, that right now the noblest, finest woman you can think of has the soul of the worst man you can think of. That's the shift. And souls that were degraded beyond even a woman would go into the bodies of animals. And slaves had no souls. They were soulless creatures. All right. I'll talk to the ladies' room. If pretend with me for the moment, a little exercise in imagination, that that's the theology we believe. That in this room right now, you ladies have the souls that are worse than the worst man you know. How do I treat you?
How do you treat?
How do now as a man, how do I treat you?
Good.
Not good. No, because you are less than the worst man I know. So I can imagine, I know this drunken, womanizing, abusive, violent. His soul is still better than any of your souls in this room right now. And he is a better person than any of you.
But
Yes.
if the lady is a fine, noble woman,
Yes.
then it's the lady that has elevated that terrible soul to
Exactly.
a better thing,
And where does that soul go to when it's elevated?
to a man.
To a man.
Oh, oh,
That's the noblest of women. Her soul, when it migrates to the next life, will migrate to a man. This is the Greeks. So, how does that affect society? It is the what does that do to the value of women? Absolutely. So this is the cultural context that these books are written in. So when Jesus sits down with the woman at the well and says to her, blessed be, go be a witness, the radical nature of that, because he sees in her a soul of value, right? When Paul says there's neither male nor female, the brakes get hit on. When he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, what's he saying?
Love that disgusting soul.
That's right. Like, and that's just what he's saying, yeah. And this, I think sometimes we fail to see the elevation of Jesus in the role of women because we don't always see the. So in this section, as he begins to talk about the church and family and marriage, Paul is a revolutionary in the culture. Now, of course, we've come, far from that, but that's the mindset of the people in the room he's talking to. So if he says to a man, sit down and break bread with a woman, or sit beside a woman, you're thinking, I would rather sit beside a dog than that woman because her soul, or the worst, I would rather sit beside that drunken, abusive, violent man than sit behind because her soul is of less value. All right, I want you to understand the milieu, the context of these therefores. Oh, absolutely, Joyce. Yeah. It was Christianity that changed that because Christianity came along and said,
in the same way you just had disgust on your face over that idea, people think that about Christians. Right? You would tell your children that they're sinners.
yeah,
Right? Like, I mean, just.
yeah, that idea is,
right, because
yeah.
you're right. But
Or you would say that I'm a sinner, that I have a sinful soul,
Right.
and that my soul is in need of salvation. What a rat! Like how? But you're right. That's what they would teach their children, and they would tell that to their daughters. Mothers would tell that to their daughters. Like it's horrific. Anyhow, that's the world of the first century. Okay, let us elevate beyond that. This is why the story of the woman at the well is such a powerful, powerful story. But that's not the story we're looking at. All right, summary: Colossians chapter 1, verses 2 through 15. He is talking about the message, and what are the three criteria of the message? The messenger, the message, and the method, right? What you say, how you say it, and who you are. So if Dylan's going to talk about airplanes, that's the message. I believe it because he has a skill set and he can explain it to me as he would unto a child. Right? That's how this works. And so Paul says there are these false teachers in the church, these people who are mystics, who are delighting in the worship of angels, who are abasing themselves, who are delighting in their visions and their dreams and all their mystical and heavenly encounters, who claim that they are ascending unto angels. And he says, look at what they're saying, their message, look at how they're living. We saw 2 weeks ago that they were corrupt, immoral, godless, money grubbing people. And he says, and look how they say it. So this is the summary of chapter 1, verses 2 through 15 on the notes in front of you. The message, the gospel, is not revealed or experienced or understood through mystical encounters, the wisdom of philosophers or spiritual guides. These all lead to bondage. Rather, it is revealed through the incarnate person of the infinite, glorious, eternal Jesus. We did our songs about who Jesus is, and Paul quotes the hymn at the beginning, which leads people into freedom. Everything else leads to slavery. We are free in a legal, in relationship to the Old Testament law, and in a spiritual sense, free from the demonic power. So don't follow them. And he makes this statement, this is the summary, that free, born again liberated people are dead to such things and alive to Jesus who defeated them. All right, that's the summary of the theology of Colossians chapter 1. Now he gets to the therefore. So the question is, how do free people live? In your mind, if you say, this is how a person who's free will live.
In excess.
In excess, yeah, very often, right?
So fine.
Yeah, because they use their freedom for their own. Yeah. Or we think without restraint or restriction, they may not abide by laws or principles. You know, have you ever followed the free men on the land down in Montana? You know, I don't need a license to drive because I'm traveling. And Chris has encountered these people, these free men on the land. You know, they're just yeah. The law doesn't apply to them. They operate under nautical law. Like it's all crazy. The Queen of Kings. Yes, exactly. Good illustration. All right. So the message struggles to show you that you are free. The consequence of this message, the way of freedom, right? Let us turn into the therefores. Consequence number 1. 2 verse 16, Tashinga. Sure, it's just that little italics of the part. Therefore, right, because if you're free, you're not in court. No one can judge you, right? If you're guilty, you go to court. Therefore, don't let those people sit in judgment of you. And he says that specifically in regard to food or drink, or in respect to festivals, or the new moon, or keeping of Sabbath day. Interesting. How do people judge religious people? How you dress, what you eat, how certain behaviors. Uh, Joni, you know, she's also about the skirt issues, you know, and hair and all that kind of stuff. What holidays, what days you don't work. Oh, your Christmas, that's a pagan holiday. And, you know, in regards to festivals, new moons are a reference to Judaism, the new moon, the calendar, the lunar calendar, or whether you take Sabbath. Paul will later on say that, you know, one man regards one day as holy, another man regards another day as holy, each unto the Lord. So notice the change in tone. Paul is dealing with weak believers. He was gentle in Romans 14, but when addressing the religious, self-righteous legalists, he is uncompromising. So interesting. I want to read you a quote. This is from the Doctrine and Covenants, chapter 89, verses 7 to 9, written by a man named Joseph Smith. Anybody know who that fella is? It is. It's the guy who wrote the Mormon book. So this is an example of modern legalism. And again, strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. In other words, alcohol. And again, tobacco is not for the body, nor for the belly, and is not good for man, but is a herb for bruises and all sick cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. And again, hot drinks are not for the body or belly. All right. If you're a Mormon, what can you not do? Can't drink alcohol. Can't smoke. Can't drink coffee, tea, hot water, hot chocolate, anything hot. So you can only drink cold water or room temperature. So you can drink iced tea and iced coffee, but you can't drink hot tea or hot coffee. You can bathe in alcohol. You can rub tobacco on your body or on a cow. I have no idea. Or you can rub it on a cow, but you can't. Which is now it gets very interesting because verse 10 says, "And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man." Marijuana, the wholesome herb. So Mormons, by law, can smoke weed because that's the wholesome herb, according to definitions, right? Do you see where legalism gets us? It's maddening, isn't it? I'm not saying that again. This is not gospel. This is Joseph Smith writing from the 19th century.
Would you like standards?
Well, this is Smith's law. Like this is the law of Mormonism. So it moves beyond. Yes, it moves beyond the measure of standard into this is the way. Yeah, a good defined point. And here's the question. I don't know if this is because of righteousness or in order to make you righteous.
Right.
I don't know which side of the coin this comes out. Absolutely. Yeah, where we would have standards. No, but to define the point. Yeah. So again, you're right, Dylan. I don't know which side of the coin this slips on, and that's worth further investigation. All right. Things which are a mere shadow was to come, but the substance belongs. So don't let people judge you on these specific rituals. Therefore, secondly, let no one keep defrauding you of your prize. What does that mean? To defraud someone of their prize? What does it mean to defraud?
Present falsely.
Yeah. To
Take it away.
Yeah, think of fraud, right? And all those shows we watched about the con men. Yeah, they're fraud, so they're taking away. And he says, here's how they take your prize. And what's the prize? Yeah, joy, freedom, all these wonderful things that come through Christ. Delighting themselves in self-abasement, right? This is the, oh, woe is me. We think of the monks of the during the Black Death, the flagellants. They went around from town to town, and they would literally, beat themselves. They would wear horsehair underwear, like take horsehair, revert it so the coarse side is inside, and they would wear this underwear. They would constantly do all these things to torture the flesh in order to purge the society of the evil of the Black Death, the self-abasement, right? Um, and the worship of angels. Who are we supposed to worship? God alone. Thou shalt have no other gods beside me. But they were saying, you don't worship the angels, therefore you're not a righteous person. Taking a stand on the visions they have seen. Oh, I saw this. I had a vision. He goes, no, no. Or inflated without cause by their fleshly minds. The contrast is in verse 9, Paul presents it, not holding fast to the head. In other words, they're holding fast to angels, not the head. They're punishing the body, rather the entire body, which is supplied and held together by joints and ligaments, grows the growth from which is. All right, working our way through. That's consequence one. Don't let anybody steal your joy by saying you shouldn't or should live a certain. Now, there are ways we should live, right? But this is not a blanket to live the way you want. But he's saying don't let somebody take away by saying you're not righteous if you don't celebrate on this holiday, if you don't eat this food, if you don't do this. There was I can't remember the man's name, but he was in Egypt, North Africa, and he was invited to Rome. And he went to his bishop and said, here in Egypt, we worship on the Sabbath, on the seventh day of the week. But in Rome, they celebrate on the Lord's Day, on the first day of the week. What should I do? And his mentor said to him, do as the Romans do. This counsel of understanding the culture you live in and not being bound by those things. I love that we are commanded to sing, but not told how to or what to, right? We are commanded to gather, but not told when. We are commanded to, there's lots of these commands that we are strictly to follow, but there's a massive amount of freedom in there. So men aren't supposed to have long hair. Who gets to define what long hair? And you're looking a little shaggy, my friend. Tashinga, where's the flat top, man? So we're commanded to be women are to be modest, right? So these questions we have a great deal of freedom in. All right. Consequence number 2, don't bow to false masters. Now he says, verse 20, therefore you have died in Christ to the elementary principles of the world. Why were you living? Do you submit yourself to such decrees as? Look at verse 21. What does it say, Joni? Oh, you already read. Dylan, oh, you're coughing. Joyce, verse 21. Right. These are all these food instructions. Don't handle this food. Don't taste that food. Don't touch that food. These are all these Jewish ordinances, which all refer things destined to perish with use. Cows, pigs, lobster. We are free to eat lobster. In accordance with the commands and teachings of men. Refer to Judy. Therefore, verse 23, Joyce.
Which be sure don't leave religion and self-abasement and severe treatment of the body, but are of no value against fleshly impulse.
All right. Do laws help you overcome temptations?
Yes.
Yes, they certainly can. At the start, right?
They can, but they can't, but not really.
Not all
Yeah,
the time.
no.
Yeah,
Can't
there's
do that.
something. Yeah, they're a thin fence. They might work under certain circumstances with certain people, but yeah, never let the cows make the fence, right? Most people will figure out how to get around the rules. Well, I'm only looking at that, or I'm only doing that, right? And that's exactly what he's saying here, because all these rules are of no value against fleshly indulgence. They don't help you. So don't be judged, don't be defrauded, don't bow down. Contrast 3, we do it. Therefore, chapter 3, verse 1, if you have been raised with Christ, notice this is in contrast to those who self-abasement, who are worshiping angels, who are falling down. He says, you're raised up. Keep seeking the things that are above. We are to be heavenly minded people. Set your treasure where? Why? Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Elevates your heart, right? Keep seeking the thing where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. He places these great theological stones in his, and set your mind on things above. That's an echo of Jesus, right? Set your heart on things above, not on the things of this earth. Jesus says that what are the things that tear us away? The deceitfulness of riches, the cares and concerns of this life. Why do you worry about what you eat and drink? For even the pagans do this. Your heavenly Father knows what you need. So set your minds. We are to be thinking about the things above, the things of Christ, the things of truth. Whatever is
Pure. Lovely.
get good and yeah. Think on these things, right? What does our human nature think on? I was going to ask Doug what he thinks about at night, right? Anxiety and fear, and our brains often we find fault. Or there's something about us that wants to find fault. If we see, there's 4 screws and one of them's out of line, all we can think about is the 4th one. We can't think about how good the other 3 are. Now, in your case, you really do want to line it. Yeah, that's good. Think of things above. Exactly. They're not of this earth. And Doug thinks about his drone, things above. That flies. Donna thinks about birds. Those are things above. But will stop that because that's not true, but that works in this case. All right. Command number 4. Your life is now hidden. Therefore, you have died to what? To the things below. We are hidden with Christ. When Christ is your life is revealed, then you'll be revealed with him in glory. Therefore, consider the members of earth because of this reality of who Jesus is, and we focus on him and we think about the resurrection and the second coming. These things elevate us. Therefore, we're dead. Notice the law won't help you deal with temptation. Who does not yield to temptation? Dead things. Dead things do not yield to temptation, right? That's what he says. You're dead. We have to remind ourselves again, this is the crucified life, right? We talked about this at men's conference, that the path forward is through the cross and through I am crucified with Christ. I am dead to this. I've also found that singing really helps in the times of temptation. It's really hard to do certain things when you're singing a mighty fortress, and your hands are raised it's hard so I find singing actually a great wall against temptation. So just
It's hard to speed on a motorbike and your hands are in the air singing.
that's right. Yeah. Nearer, my God, to thee. Yeah. There's all
That dead, consider yourself as dead, right?
yeah.
Even your earthly body as dead to immorality. Would be the same, I think, as the idea of being free through death, right?
Absolutely.
You're dead, you're not a slave anymore because you have died, and that contract is broken, right?
Yeah, it's all tied to this imagery, right? The image of death becomes the path to life because it's the way of Christ, the crucified life, dead to sin, dead to desire, dead, and then born anew with Christ. Absolutely. Consider the members of your earthly body. He's talking about this stuff, right? And what are we dead to? I'm dead to immorality, to impurity, to passion, to evil desire, to greed. All of this is idolatry. For it's because of these things the wrath of God will come upon the sons of disobedience. And in them you also once walked when you were living them. This crucified life is Paul's message. That the pathway forward is always through reckon yourself indeed to be dead to sin, but alive to Christ Jesus. This is the message repeated throughout Scripture. Now we get to the last section. This is the long moral list. One of the things the Greeks would often do is have moral lists. Whatever is right, noble, pure, good. And they would have these lists of virtues. And this is the beginning of his virtue list. So he says, put aside, starts with a negative, but now also put them all aside. All right. We're not going to go through them because it would become a very disciplined and somewhat tedious word study to go through them, but they're all pretty straightforward. Put aside anger. Why do we get angry? We didn't get. Do you have a small child? Exactly. So I should surrender. Yeah. Wrath, which is pure violence, malice, and again slander, the speech about others, and abusive speech. That's stupid, so and so, that kind of thing. And don't lie to one another. By the way, God really hates liars. You go through Proverbs and you go to Revelation. Outside the city gates are adulterers, immorals, and witchcraft, and all liars. Since you have laid aside, put them aside because you've laid them aside and put on the new self, this renewed. All right, here we go. This is when it gets interesting in verse 11. A renewal in which there is no distinction between Greeks and Jews. What a radical thought. Circumcised and the uncircumcised, barbarians. In the Roman Empire, there were two kinds of people. There were citizens and barbarians. Citizens lived within the empire, had all the protection of the empire. They were blessed. You might have been a slave, but the citizens were the core of the empire. Everybody outside that zone was a barbarian, and barbarians were awful, to be killed, basically, right? And how did you know who the barbarians were? They had beards. Yes. Romans shaved. Sorry, I keep coming back to that, but this idea of the civilized person. You see all those
things that the Romans had that.
They also had very short hair. So if you look at all those sculptures, statues of Nero and Caesar, they all have, you notice, everybody has short hair and clean shaven because only barbarians had beards. It was just a reference. So the barbarians were outside the city gates. So, but he says, there's no such thing as a barbarian or a Scythian, those horrible Scythians, slaves or freemen, but Christ is all in all. The walls of those cultural barriers are broken in Christ. So lay aside that prejudice. And not even it's more than prejudice. It's a false understanding of who people are. All right, but put on. So those who've been chosen God, Donna, put on what? Verse 12.
So it's heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
Keep reading. Verse 13.
Bearing with one another and forgiving whoever has anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you.
So, in contrast to those who are angry, wrathful, malicious, slanderous, abusive, who are lying, what are the children of God like? The opposite. This is that turnover, right? And we're not going to go through the list, but look at some of those words. What word jumps out at you on that verse, those two verses? Is there a characteristic that jumps out at you? Forgiving one another. Yeah. Anyone who has a complaint against anyone, forgive them.
I like kindness.
Kindness.
Mhm.
Yeah. Kindness goes a long ways. Yeah. Patience. It's interesting. In the second and leading into the third century, in that kind of 100-year window, the only two remaining virtues in this list that the church fathers actually wrote about, well, there's only one virtue they actually wrote about. They didn't write about any of the other virtues except patience. The treatise, there's two treatises on patience that are written. And we have, we have tons and literally tons, and by the time you do the weight of them, but hundreds of documents. And they never mention, there's not a single, like a thesis or a treatise on compassion or forgiveness, but there are two treatises on patience. Patience was the virtue that the early church focused on as the cardinal virtue in all of this. Why?
Well, a patient person is going to be kind, humble, gentle, and
Yeah.
compassionate.
And a patient person is opposite of anger, wrath, slander, abusive speech. Yeah, they called for, they called it the patient ferment. That patience was like a fermenting process, that the soul didn't boil over into anger and wrath and vengeance and all that. It just kept kind of just perking along with it. Anyhow, that patience was the early church cardinal virtue. All right. But beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. Consequence 7, this is how it'll change you. Now, let the peace of Christ. Paul plays word. When Augustus Caesar came on the throne, he was Julius Caesar's nephew who inherited. Julius Caesar adopted Augustus and made him emperor. Augustus declared Pax Romana. This was called the Peace of Rome. And under Pax Romana, the Roman Empire stabilized for the better part of a century. It wasn't just him, but it stabilized for a long period of time. And it was under this time that Jesus was born. It's under this time that we get the growth of the empire, we get the stability, the great flourishing, the incredible wealth of Rome. And it allowed for transportation, it allowed for taxation, a distribution of food. It was the golden era of, and on the coins, it said, Caesar is Lord, and basically it said on the other side, Pax Romana. So that was the law, the peace of Rome. In other words, the peace of Rome be with you, and don't you dare disturb the peace. So, peace with you, don't mess it up, don't disturb it. And along comes Paul, and what does he just say here? And let the rule. And Christians came along. Oops. Pax Christos, peace of Christ. So the Romans would say, and may the peace of Rome be with you. And the Christians would say,
Also with you.
they would say, and may the peace of Christ be with you. And they'd go, pardon me? Paul does this. Caesar is Lord. Paul says, no, Jesus. Rome is peace. No. And this peace isn't passive. It's what rules. How did the Romans rule peace? Power, right? Swords, legions, and ships, right? You don't mess with the peace. That's why we call them peace officers, right? You don't mess with the peace. And this is the rule of Christ, his reign. This is a very, not militant, but a very judicial statement. It's not just a fuzzy, I feel at peace. It's the peace of Christ is the rule. All right. In your hearts, because that's what you were called to. Let the word of Christ richly dwell within you with all wisdom and teaching and admonishing each other. Here we go. My pet peeve as of late, admonishing whether with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Here we're back into imperatives. What does it say? Singing with thankfulness in your heart. Absolutely. How does the word of Christ dwell in us? We sometimes memorize it. But if I were to I'll start a line. Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. Sorry, young generation, I apologize. That's Journey from ways back. We often remember songs before we remember text, right? Music has the ability to combine thought in our process. When seniors get older and dementia begins to kick in, as soon as you start playing piano or something, they'll often pick up and they can sing. When people stutter, they don't stutter when they sing because it's a different part of the brain. So there's a great story about Jim Neighbors who stuttered quite badly. Like he was quite a stutterer, but he sang beautifully. And he was in a motel room one time, and the guy broke into, because he's famous, to rob him. And he was trying to say, "There's a robber in the room." He said, "There's a robber in the room," and he could sing, right? Because then he didn't stutter. It worked in his brain differently. I just remember telling that story, thinking, "Great story." So. Let the word of Christ dwell richly how in you? Singing. This is why as a church we sing, why we teach our children music, why we sing it. Do you sing at Club DJ? Yeah, absolutely. This is why we sing and music in our cars, because that's how the word of Christ richly dwells in us. Not just simply dwelling, richly dwelling. So big champion of music as the means by which the word of Christ. That's why it's great to listen to scripture and song. All right.
That admonish. It was ultrasonic cleaner, and instead of warning, it says admonition. That was funny. Listen, I see admonish all the time.
Yeah, and music correctly can admonish our souls, can warn us, right? Comfort us, warn us, correct us.
One another.
Yes, with psalms, hymns. It's interesting. You could admonish and warn someone with music, and whatever you do, in word and deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to whatever. All right. Verse 18 is why I alluded early on, and then I want to pick up the second part of this. Women, be subject to your husband as is fitting to the Lord. Under Jewish law, here's the footnote. So remember, under Greek thinking, women are lesser beings. Now, under Jewish legalism, it gets equally wrong. Under Jewish law, a woman was a thing. She was the possession of her husband just as much as his house or flocks or his material goods. She had no legal rights whatsoever. For instance, under Jewish law, a husband could divorce his wife for any cause, while a wife had no rights whatever in the initiation of the divorce. In Greek society, respectable women lived a life of entire seclusion. She never appeared in the streets alone, not in the market. She lived in the women's apartments and was to not join her menfolk even for meals. For her, there was a demand of complete servitude and chastity. But her husband could go out as much as he chose, could enter into as many relationships outside of marriage as he liked, and incur no stigma. Both under Jewish and Greek laws and customs, all the privileges belong to the husband, and all the duties belong to the wife. So women lived in what was called in wealthy homes, in the women's quarters. The men lived in their own bedrooms and they had their own areas, but women were kept together. They were always under supervision, even in public, and they owed their husband complete chastity, while the husband owed her nothing. Brothels were quite popular, those kind of things. So he could be as promiscuous, he could do anything he wanted without any conversation or consent or any relationship whatsoever, where she was. And so Paul, he says, don't be fitting to your subject to your husbands as the culture, but as fitting in the Lord. So we forget sometimes how subject women were both spiritually and physically. Husbands, then he flips it and he says agape. And what is agape? And it means give. So that's
self-sacrifice.
thank you. Give that another might live. He says, husbands, give to your wives so that they might live. What were husbands doing? They were taking from their wives that they might live. Right? He flips the culture around. He doesn't say husbands eros your wives, desire your wives. Which we kind of put in country music now. And he doesn't say husbands, be kind to your wives, Philadelphia, or treat them like family, storge. He says, no, this is agape. And do not be embittered or exasperated or angry against them. You know why a husband could divorce his wife? Because he was exasperated with her. If she cooked a meal wrong, get out of here, throw her in the street, right? If he was angry with her, he could divorce her. And he says, this is not the grounds for, do not be exasperated or angry against them. So Paul chides and says, husbands, this is the new way of treating your wife, which is incredibly counterculture. He says, you do not treat a degraded soul with agape, right? You don't love a degraded soul as yourself. You don't give to a degraded soul that it might have life, because who cares? So anyway, that's the elevation. Children, be obedient. Literally, do what you hear. That's a great definition of obedience. Children, just do what you're told. To your parents in all things, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, he says, don't exasperate. The word here means to arouse, to excite, or to kindle, or make your children resentful or irritated. Why? So they don't lose heart. So the more you make them resentful, you arouse them to anger, they're going to lose heart. Slaves, in all things, there's the same word, obey, do what you hear. Those who are your masters on earth, but not with external service, but as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart. And then he does actually a few more verses on slaves. And then masters, grant your slaves justice and fairness. Again, if a man has a soul, and then a woman has a degraded soul, and an animal has even a degraded soul, who's at the end of that chain? Slaves, because slaves have no souls. And if something doesn't have a soul, how do you treat it?
Worse.
Anything, worse than anything. This doesn't have a soul. I don't care, right? I can use. And so he says, masters, stop treating your slaves as soulless beings. Do justice and fairness, knowing that you too have a master. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, knowing that You have a master. And how does he treat you? Oh, okay, right. Forgive one another as you've been forgiven. Treat your servants as you've been treated by your master. All is. So these are all cultural references, right? He's revitalizing the culture. He's changing the direction of it in so many ways. All of you, devote yourselves to prayer under these commands. Keep alert with an attitude of thanksgiving. Also notice, sing with thanksgiving in your heart. Pray with thanksgiving in your heart. Pray at the same time, and then conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of every opportunity. We're almost done. And he wraps up the last command is, let your speech always be with grace, as seasoned with salt. What's the value of salt? Yeah. Roman soldiers got paid a salary. They got paid in salt. You got your pound of salt. So a man is not worth his salt. You ever heard that phrase? Yeah, he's not worth his pay. He's not worth his salt. They got their, and it's because salt was measurable and transportable, right? It's a big object. And then they would take it into the cities and they could sell it. So you got paid a salary, you got paid in salt. That's the value of salt. Because what does salt do? Exactly. Preservative. Yeah, you can turn ham into bacon into magic ham. So it has this preservative. That's why Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth, right? There's great value. And that's how. All right. I'm going to wrap this up. This is the big list. And I know I went through it fairly quickly. Any thoughts that leap off the page?
I realized before I've read it well time, but I didn't think of it. But in that last bit, it talks about husbands, children, and slaves.
Yeah.
And fathers and slaves. Only why he says be subject, the rest are all just obey.
Yes, there's a note for the
Interest.
I don't know the nuance on the word. I'd have to dig into that because it's different than the obedience of children, the obedience of slaves.
Government.
Yes.
It was be subject to one another.
Yeah.
It's not. My guess would be like obedience is to be subject to comes from a willful desire to say I will do it because I want to believe I ought to versus obey is just maybe in light of consequence.
Yeah, I think there's more of a willfulness.
Children maybe don't understand the idea of being subject to their parents. They
Yeah.
just need to know that there's consequences by doing it.
Working together that your children, you are.
Well, but be subject to the government. It's not like we're working together.
We pay our taxes and all that. I don't know.
We're working together.
Yay, we're working together. I think there's a notable difference there, and I don't know what the difference is, but I think you're onto something, and it's worth investigation. It's a good observation.
That
That's right. It's a different word, and it's the same word it uses: be subject to one another. Right. Yeah. So there's something in that language, and be sub. So yeah, let me dig in. I'll dive into that a bit. Put a note there. All right. I know it's getting warm, and I'm warm too, which is rare. All right. Anything else that leaps off the page? Thank you, Dylan.
I think like with the whole husband and wife thing, the wives will be much more. They'll be very willing to submit to their husbands when their husbands are also loving them back.
We work well in a loving environment. We work better together. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why he says to slaves as unto the Lord. Yes. Yeah. And a willingness out of this. And that's why he says to slaves, like, you're serving God. You're serving your master, so have a different attitude towards it. And masters be cautious. These are all Roman household characteristics. Like he actually addresses every facet of a household. Wives, children, servants. He's revolutionizing how the Roman household viewed itself and how the Roman household actually functioned. Because within the Roman household, it was the pater familia, the father, and he was master. There was a time in Roman history, it changed quickly, but a father could kill his children without consent or legal implication. Now it changed rapidly, but in the darkest days of the Roman Empire, that's how much power the father had over his household. All right. Everything rests, and I'm going to wrap it up with this. I've got 5 minutes. With something that I've shared with you before. No surprise on this. Everything rests. The therefore, which is the front part, rests on what we believe. We are like, and this is I've talked to you before, and maybe this is familiar to you, but it's where I land today on this and the critical nature of steering. We are rear-wheel drive cars. So this is from the top. So back here are the driveways. This, and the differential. A-arms here. All right, we're tracking. Not front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive. We are driven by belief. The Christ. How many times does John say when in the Gospel of John, these things are written so that you might believe on the Son of God, right? Yeah. The woman at the well is the first one who says, and she believed. Where Nicodemus may have or may not have, that's up for conjecture, but the great moment of John's revelation is that she believed. So, and why do we believe what we believe? Because our parents. Yeah, parents, experiences, biases, all kinds of reasons, right? We can believe bad things. We can believe truth. The demons believe and they tremble. So we are driven by our beliefs. The goal of Christian instruction is to give you in truth, the right thing to believe, so that you can believe the truth, right? Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you shall be saved. Salvation is rooted in belief, right? What we believe then determines what we value. That's the other thing that drives our values drive us, right? So if I believe that hedonism, pleasure, right? If I believe that pleasure is whoever has the most toys wins, what am I going to value? Exactly. If I believe that being my height but 280 pounds of solid muscle, that's going to define me, then what do I value?
Time and energy.
Time and energy. Oh, it's tied together. A logical connection. Okay, that's what drives our beliefs and values. Then this determines our pursuits. What we value, we pursue. Makes sense, right? Seek not the things of the world, but put your treasures in heaven, where your treasures are, there you are. And then this is our actions. Pursuits and actions are linked because it's our kind of actions, right? So this drives me forward, but this is what people see. They see actions and pursuits. Now, what's the problem with my illustration is that they're actually all connected, right? My actions can validate my beliefs, or they can invalidate my beliefs. My pursuits can be not always connected. I could have a false sense. So this illustration, it works not always, but I don't think it's as simple as I'm drawing it because there is a more interconnected nature to it. But for the simplicity of the illustration. So Paul gives us this as the second half of the book, and this is the first half. He says, believe who Jesus is. Value the things of the kingdom. Value humility and mercy and forgiveness and justice. And as you value those things, then you will begin to pursue them. And this will guide your life. Your actions guide your life, right? In a sense, just as your beliefs. So my illustration is, this is actually a four-wheel steering. Because we're steered by the full forces, right? The problem is people only see this in us, for the most part. And they measure us by this. They say, oh, that's who you are. Right?
Well, you can work that backwards too.
What's that?
You can work that backwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times remember the old Chevys, the rear wheels were always covered. People don't always see our beliefs and values. They're often shrouded, but they certainly see this. And so the last half of the book, Paul says, because you believe this and value this, this is going to alter this. And this is going to drive and direct this. These are evidence of this. That's rather simplistic, I know. All right. Any thoughts on Colossians as we wrap it up? What's the big point of the book? Every teacher's nightmare moment. All right. Bunch of mystics, Judaizers, and angel worshippers, and Greek philosophers were poisoning the church. And Paul comes along and says, this is bad. Don't let people judge you. Don't live that way. Live through Christ, who is, and so he elevates Christ at the beginning and puts all those other things second. He says, put off that. The other way this put on, put off is the Christian clothes, right? Clothes make the man. Manners maketh the man, I think was the line from the movie. The other illustration that Colossians works is the clothing law, that people judge us by our externals, whatever, right? All right. That's Colossians. Hopefully you remember one thing. Sing. We're going to take a break for a surprising long time. Normally it's just for the summer, but we're going to be off for 3 months. So it's going to feel weird and long, but hopefully we'll have an appetite when we come back.
Yep.